Everyday life issues broken down so you can make the best decision. Coming to you from Austin, Texas. This is The Deciding Factor with your hosts, Alton Hill and John Herzog.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening today. Our show is going to be about renting and buying houses today. The first topic is going to be, should you buy or rent a house right now or should we wait till later? Then we're going to go over to, should you buy a fixer-upper or go brand new on your house? And then finally, should we be an investor or a consumer in today's market? And I'm going to actually start with you, Alton.
Yeah.
I actually walked in on you sunbathing before I came in, so clearly you were ready for the show today.
Well, that's right. You know, when you're doing a podcast, you have to have a good tan, and the sun's out today. It's been a little rainy, so had to take advantage of it for sure.
I know it's supposed to rain all week, starting tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Ugh, it's going to be miserable.
Spring, you know, you get the rain, but then you get these little breaks for the sun, and got to capitalize.
Now, so you have a big dog, and I've got a little dachshund, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got a deer mounted in our little studio here.
Yeah.
AKA your office, right?
Yep.
But I've got a ram that I put up on the wall the other day, and the dog just happened to be sniffing around, walked into the game room where I have it, and she caught a glimpse of it, and she lost it. Does your dog do that?
No, he hasn't. He hasn't really freaked out about the deer head yet, but he does bark at a lot of things. Everything. She lost it. I mean, just absolutely lost it. And it took us a good hour for her to stop and just leave it alone. But maybe your ram has a bigger rack than my little whitetail here.
Maybe. We'll see. Yours definitely has a longer neck, but
yeah,
I don't know. So she's definitely scared of the heads. But anywho, got a little sidetracked there.
Well, no, I mean, like you brought up about pets, right?
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about renting or buying, I was actually looking not too long ago. There's a lot of renters that will accept cats and will accept small dogs. But when you tell them you have a Great Pyrenees that weighs 100 pounds,
that's a problem.
They're like, well, I don't think so.
Well, when we were looking to rent our house, there were several houses would absolutely do no pets.
Yeah. I mean, that was when I rented my first house. That was a thing that I had to figure out. Do I want to let people bring their pets in or not? And I thought, I don't want to let pets in. It seems like, I mean, I have pets. I know what to do to the house, right? And they told me, I should have checked the number, but it was essentially at least 50% of the market. You just blew, right? Because most people have pets. They love their pets, and they're not going to rent from you if you don't allow pets. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing to consider when you're renting or buying and you have a huge dog or cats or any of that. Nice.
Well, then I guess let's jump in. So should you buy or rent the house right now in this time? We're going through all the COVID mess that we talked about in our first podcast there. I actually looked on a website to make sure my pros and cons that I thought of were kind of matching up to everybody else's views and opinions. So I got these from a company that gives out, I can't say their name, but they give out fast loans, if you know what I mean. But let's start with renting, because that's currently what I do. So mobility freedom is what they have listed here. You're able to move around whenever you want, right? Then landlord pays maintenance. That's the biggest thing for me. I don't want to pay for an AC going out. They had to redo our roof right away. That was a little annoying, but okay. I didn't have to pay for it. But do check your clauses, because I've never had this clause in any of my apartments or anything like that, but we have to pay $100 every time that something breaks, even if it's something stupid that we had no effect on, like the refrigerator goes out. That's not my refrigerator. Never touched it other than opening and closing it. But it went out. We had a washer go out. We had pipes start leaking. It's just $100 really. I've got to pay for this every time. Like, I didn't know I bought a lemon.
Yeah, right.
But I guess it works good if you got renters that constantly just make up stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably sounds like that landlord's gotten burned. Getting calls every day.
It was a wreck before we came in. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Then doesn't require expensive closing costs, which is great. Most can't afford it. No fluctuation in monthly housing expenses, except for obviously every time you renew your contract. Allows you to test drive a house if you're going to plan on possibly buying it later. Of course, most people, I think, when they're renting a house, they plan to just rent the house.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some good rent to own deals, right? And that was something that when I was renting my first house, the guy was a great tenant. And I was like, hey, if you want to talk about buying, I'd be happy to credit you, right? Like all of these years that you've been paying. But the reality is, like, that's a small percentage of people who can actually do that. Like, I've talked to investors that have rental properties and they're all rent to own, and never.
Wow.
Never. I know that there's a percentage of people who like can follow through on that, but generally, like, people who are renting, they don't follow through with that rent to own. So not that that's bait and switch, but
that's where it benefits you, right? Because then you get all these cancellation fees, or you just gain everything back.
I mean, I think still, if you're a renter, it's a better deal, right? That you could have the right to purchase if you want at some point. Just statistically, I don't think it generally happens, right? Because as a renter, you want to move around. You don't want to buy.
Fair enough. Let's go to cons on renting. You don't build any equity, limited ability to customize your living space. That actually happened to us. I wanted to add a second room into our attic because we got a nice little space up there. All I'd have to do is drywall it, put some fake wood flooring down, go to the dollar tile store or whatever.
Yeah.
And, man, they shot it down. They were just like, absolutely not.
No way.
I mean, that kind of upset me, but rent could go up over time. That was the every time you renew. So if you can sign a 2-year lease, I'd sign a 2-year lease. Don't do a 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, that's about a guarantee, right? That rent's going to go up because
yeah,
rents go up when taxes go up. And I don't know any time in history that taxes have gone down. Maybe it's happened, but not to me.
Man. Landlord might sell or decide to stop renting. I actually had that happen to me as well. The first house I actually rented, it went under foreclosure. The company that bought it ended up offering us 4 months rent to get out now. And so I clearly took the money and ran. But and then limited sense of home stability and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to renting, just like there's pros and cons to buying, for sure. A couple of things to add on what you said is I think sometimes renting can make sense when you're like very location centric, right? Like when you want to live in some place, there may not be the place that you want to buy. So you're kind of forced to rent, but that still gives you that option. Yeah, it's not a huge investment payoff, right? But you're living where you want. Could be due to schools or new job, right? Yeah. So obviously that's going to make sense. But yeah,
or sometimes a disease gets in your way, and then I mean, I would like to go out and buy right now, but
that's the thing, right? With the coronavirus, we're kind of shifting gears a little bit from what we've been experiencing is a seller's market, right? But now we're kind of shifting a little bit more to a buyer's market, and we're seeing, I mean, let's be honest, it's the people who are going from paycheck to paycheck. They're all furloughed, right? And they don't know, hey, where's that next paycheck coming from? And now we're potentially in a situation where we could be seeing more foreclosures later, right?
Well, and you can't even get a loan if you're furloughed, right?
Oh yeah, I guess that's true.
Because
right?
then they want your check, and
Yeah.
you can't provide proof of income except for
Sure.
Hey, I'm furloughed.
Right.
So they're going to have to change how this is done pretty quick, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely. But then again, like back to the pros and cons of renting and buying, you know, if you get furloughed and you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're less likely to get foreclosed on, right? And so I think that's definitely something that you have to consider, that if you're living paycheck to paycheck.
But it's faster to get evicted than it is to be foreclosed on, right?
That. But maybe we should just say we shouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck. Can we say that?
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
So then let's go on to the list that they had here for buying, pros and cons. Pros list here is you build equity over time, which always is a plus. My parents, their house is 3 or 4 times more valuable than it was when they built it. I was 3rd grade. So now I'm super old.
Yep. You're really old.
Home value may increase over time. Problem is it may not, depending on what area.
Yeah, whether you're in Austin or California, right? I mean, it's like you look at, we're seeing a lot of home buyers here from California, right? That the value's just skyrocketed so much. And
California and New York are moving into Austin heavily, and they're gonna do the same to our market as they did to their market. I think if this keeps up. You may reap some tax benefits is another good thing. Unlimited freedom to customize your living space, sense of home stability. So you get that the mental comfort, I guess you would say. Then the cons, closing costs can be really high. Responsibility for maintenance and repairs, which requires time and effort. Do you do a lot of maintenance on your house?
I should.
But you don't?
Well, I would like to. I'd like to do a lot of things. I mean, I've done a lot. So I bought this house that we're recording in, I guess about 6 years ago, and I bought it foreclosed. So I've done a lot of things to just bring it up to a livable space. And
but every time you do, the kids bring it down.
It's a constant struggle for real.
With
that and the dog.
Or the dog bites the corner of the
gnaws on my on my baseboards there. Yeah, that's a real struggle, whether you're renting or buying. Is it? I mean, maybe I can't speak for your kids, but my kids and dogs just like they don't care. They don't care about my investment. They don't care about my home. They're just gonna chew it up and pee and poop all over it.
We have trouble with some of the kids peeing, but I guess that's another story. Mm-hmm. Less flexibility to move around, so you really need to want to be staying put for a period of time. Of course, life happens. You may get a new job and have to move somewhere else. Home value may decrease, unfortunately, depending on the areas you're in. So make sure you research and talk to your real estate agent about that. Recent tax laws could also hamper your tax benefits. I'm not a tax specialist when it comes to homes, because I still have yet to buy a home.
Yeah, there's definitely taxes are a big thing when you're buying a home or you're investing. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but definitely something to think about when you're investing, especially.
So when I was researching this, it seemed like everybody came down to the same kind of opinion, and that is, it all comes down to, do you have enough money? And that's the big problem we have right now, is this uncertainty of COVID, and now I'm on furlough.
Yep.
So I can't qualify as it is right now, but on top of that, they want money down, and you never know how much money they want down.
Sure.
Which I don't understand. Why can't we just nothing down?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are some incentives for that. And that's the thing that I guess I've learned over time is that, I don't know how many people have read President Trump's The Art of the Deal. And I mean, it's an old book, but he talks about how he puts together these elaborate deals. You know, we're talking about buying a house that you live in, but you know, when he's putting these deals together, he's building condos and hotels and, I mean, just all sorts of elaborate things that take years to happen, right? He's got to get permits from the city, and he's got to get these people who are renting to move out so he can buy that building and get these rights and convince these people that to sell or rent him the rights above their place, right? It's like all this crazy stuff. And, you know, so there's a lot that goes into these deals that I think when you're buying, if you're a little clever and you have some good ideas and some commitment, you can find some pretty elaborate things. Like I know in this neighborhood, for a while, the builder was doing some zero down, which is why I got into this as a foreclosure, because people said, oh, I can buy a house with zero down, right? But they really couldn't afford it. But zero down, why not, right? And then what happened? They lost their job and had to move out. Mm. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the deal, the rub there, right? Like figuring that part out.
So speaking of businessmen, Dave Ramsey, I had to look him up on this subject, right?
Sure. Had
to be one of those. So uniquely, David actually goes on to talk about it ultimately comes down to the money as well, right? Your rent should be 25% or less of your income. If you can't make that happen, he says you really shouldn't even look at it. And on top of that, the time frame to stay in a home, he says at minimum, plan to stay there 3 years. So,
yeah. So I think that's the thing. So I mean, we've kind of talked about some renting and buying options, and like, I guess, John, you're renting right now. I mean, would you prefer to be buying, or I mean, do you think that the renting pros outweigh the cons for where you're at? Like, where are you at on this?
Well, so that particular area, it's really unique because I know if I were to buy a house right now in the same neighborhood I'm in, I could save probably $200, maybe a little more on my rent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
even with the taxes.
Yeah.
Now, taxes later on, because they're about to really expand, it's going to be horrendous, but we'll see if I stick around for that. I want to enhance the property, and I can't do it. So it's really annoying. And, we argue about who's going to take what TV to play Xbox on. So it's like, I need to turn the garage into a gaming center, but I'm not going to spend that time or money to do that. But then on top of that, like I mentioned, furloughed, I can't even qualify right now. Mm-hmm. So until I start changing the rules and all that,
So that's, sorry, go ahead.
But I mean, that's basically it. Is I would like to buy, but the situation's not right.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. So a lot of people who are small business owners, right? They don't have that W-2. And so it's kind of hard to get these, what do you call it? Like an FHA or one of those types of loans that have certain requirements, right? 3.5% down, 5% down, plus closing, or maybe not closing. One thing you need to think about, like if you want to be a home buyer, I think is looking for a mortgage broker. And a mortgage broker is someone who has access to a lot of different banks and can be really, especially in times like these where interest rates are going down, things are a little unstable, find a good mortgage broker and negotiate it. When I bought my first house, this is kind of a savage way to deal it. I don't know if I can encourage it, but if you want to save some money, this is the first point in time where I realized, like, you don't have to trade time for money. And I had 2 mortgage brokers competing for my business when I was buying my first house. I'd never bought a house.
Wow.
I was like 20, how old was I? I got married when I was 19. And then 2.5 years later, bought a house. So
love how you just cleared your throat to that.
There you go. So yeah, I was trailer trash for a while, and no offense, guys, but lived in a trailer park in a 5th wheel travel trailer while I was saving up to get my first house. And anyway, bought the house after I had these mortgage brokers competing for my business. And literally in like a 20-minute phone call, I was saving $1,000. Oh, I can knock off $1,000 in closing costs. And then I, forward that email on to the other one. Oh, well, look what I can do. Oh, I found this other bank that would do this. And so I ended up putting, what was it? I think it was like 10% down and $1,000 in closing costs for my first house, which, it's pretty good.
Man, I see. I've only
mortgage broker.
I've only thought that you just go to one mortgage broker, but I guess you should go to multiples. Is that what you're saying ultimately?
I'm just saying that worked out for me. But that was that was my first time, and I was really scared. No one, right? We've said these are things that you don't get taught in school, right? They don't teach you how to do taxes. They don't teach you how to go buy a house. And so I didn't know. And so I guess my paranoia said, oh, I'm going to do this and that, and had a little good luck along the way. And so for me, it's always been about buying, because for me, the deciding factor is generating like net worth. How do I make money? And I don't know what the exact statistic is. Y'all listen long enough, you'll realize that I'm not the specifics guy, but I can generally get you close. And so we probably all heard this idea that 70% of millionaires are made through real estate, right? Because it's really easy. You buy a couple of properties and have them appreciate, bam, now you got this big net worth, and you're controlling a lot of assets with a small investment. So for me, that was why I made my poor wife live in the trailer instead of renting, because I was at the time I was paying $250 a month for rent, electricity, trash, all of it. And then I ended up selling that travel trailer for the down payment on my house. So
were you living there first before you got married, though?
Where?
At the trailer?
No.
Okay, so
I bought the trailer when I was engaged.
So you kind of forced her hand. She was just like, I'm living good. And you were like, no, you're coming.
No, I said, hey, babe, look at this fifth wheel travel trailer I got for you. This is like your dream come true. But, but she believed in the vision. She did. And I was like, look, we can rent a house, or I can buy this cash. We can suffer. But look, the thing was, when we were, I was working and going to school. She was going to school and working, both full time. We were in bed at the same time for about 3 hours.
Really?
Yeah, because I worked night shift and went to school all day, and she worked and went to school all day. So I got home at 1 a.m.
And no kids while you were out there?
No. So really it was okay, because we never stayed there. But anyway, so for me, it was always about making the money. And then when I bought that house, it was probably $120,000 house that I think I got for $105,000. So it was a starter home, the little 3-bedroom that we started our family in, and I got good equity in it immediately in that house. So for me, that's for renting or buying. The deciding factor is about, can I generate revenue, income? For me, it's that's what it's about, and so you just can't do that with renting.
So then, what about the idea? Let's go into: do we buy a fixer upper or do we buy brand new? And a lot of the things I read, and obviously I've got my opinion, but I want to get the statistics or find out what others think. So, the big one is new homes have warranties. Fixer uppers, you could fall through the floor on the second day you're there, right?
It's possible for sure.
That'd be like one of those cartoons you've watched, right?
Well, yeah, more than the cartoons. Actually, when I was young, I fell through. Anyway, go on with the pros and cons.
You have some bad memories from that one, I take it, huh?
Well, yeah, I was young. I survived it.
So then, of course, your favorite topic, millennials. Mm-hmm. They love they love buying new things, so they tend to lean more towards buying new.
I thought that all millennials just live with their moms. Is that no?
Sometimes. So it depends, I used to, unfortunately, but It is what it is. Making it easier to sell upcoming generations is, that's what a new house is. It's easier to do because you've got these newer amenities. Down where I'm at, they're about to have this big shopping center coming in, and that's why my taxes are going to go up. But
Yep.
They want those things.
For sure.
It's just like, what's that place up north? The
Domain.
The Domain, right?
Yeah.
They like that really close atmosphere, big city life, I guess.
There's definitely
social life.
Definitely benefits to that, like buying a nice condo in a place like that or downtown. For sure, there's benefits. Just walk to Whole Foods, get your groceries.
So another thing to add to the new homes, though, is, in 10 years from now, or looking long term, is newer homes tend to hold more value, partially just because of, like we just said, the amenities, the schools. The schools are newer. A lot of the richer people like the newer schools that aren't going to have maintenance or all these other issues we've heard about on the news.
Yeah.
And so existing homes then, what I have listed is homes have grown in mature areas and gives a full, sorry, you passed there.
It's contagious.
It
we
is.
both got coronavirus.
Or maybe it's because we're not drinking coffee right now.
We're going to die before the podcast ends.
Sorry, let me start over. So the existing homes have grown in mature areas already. So you already have your statistics ahead of time. You can look at it before you move in, get a full glance of it. You even know what the schools are like. So is it being run by a bunch of people that you don't agree with their mindset, or maybe it's perfect. Maybe it's I compare Dripping Springs. Dripping Springs is pretty high up on the list in our area, and I don't know that I want to live in that area, but man, their school district sounds just like it's popping. It's really good.
Houses aren't cheap in that area for sure.
No, well, but in general, Austin.
Sure.
Austin's really expensive.
Yeah. You just end up paying for schools, right?
Yeah.
And rents and taxes. I think that's over half of my land taxes right now.
Yeah.
Is schools. Go straight to the schools.
So when looking up, existing houses or fixer-uppers versus new, is you kind of know that your value's there if you buy used already and what it's going to be like in the next few years.
Yeah.
Whereas the new home, it's good for 10 years, but then what happens after that point?
Yeah.
Because I think 10 years is when they stop building new, right? So if they pop up a new subdivision down the street from you, before they sell all those houses, it takes 8 to 10 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a while for sure. I mean, I guess that's more of the neighborhood setting, right? But like in these, what do they call them? Master planned communities, right? Where they're putting in the pool and all of that stuff, which I think is the bulk of what people are buying. But yeah, I mean, again, for me, it's when I look at buying a house, it's about equity capture, right? So can you capture equity now? Because you make your money when you buy. And so like recently I've been looking at some of these houses. I've been dreaming, about moving into a nicer house, a little bigger. Really got my eye on a porte cochere. Can't spell that for you, but it's like fancy stuff. Anyway, so Heather and I have been going and looking at these.
Where do you get your words?
I spent a lot of time on Google looking that one up. 'Cause I think it's a French word. And basically it's a part of the house where the driveway goes under the house. It's like a tunnel on the house. Anyway, maybe I didn't know about that more than like 2 months ago. Anyhow, so as I was saying, looking at these new houses in these master planned communities that are brand new, I love it. They've got they're all Wi-Fi and smart and all these fancy things, all this new technology, shingles that'll last for 1 million years and warranties and all that stuff. But the reality is that house that I'm looking at that's new, that the builder's selling me, I can go down the street to a person who's lived in that house for a few years and save 20%. So I'm not saying that that's normal. I'm just saying that if you're going through that process of building and getting new that way, there's going to be a premium for selecting these things. And I think that what happens when people start building that is like, it's just like if you're picking out a car, it's like, oh, I don't want the regular seats. I want leather. I need to have heated and cooled seats. And then, no, those wheels don't look good. We need to upgrade. And then before you know it, like you're spending a lot more than maybe you had planned. And so for me, if you can find a foreclosure or just a place where it has good comps and you're paying less per square foot, then it can become an investment, right? And so when I'm looking at it from that standpoint, as an investor or someone who wants to capture equity, get that money when I buy, man, it's just hard to justify like a new one.
So looking back, let's say probably, what was that, 6 years ago or so, I was looking at buying a house in Buda, and there was a house I looked at, and it took about maybe a year, and that same house had already increased, already pre-built and everything. It increased about $40,000 to $50,000 in just that 1 year. So does it really make sense to buy a fixer-upper, knowing that even I'm brand new, you can have a $30,000 increase up to 50 in a year, versus what to expect on a fixer-upper? Like what would you say is a good fixer-upper profit?
I think it just depends on what you can handle. So this house, for instance, I purchased, almost 50% off. It was foreclosed. I got it through an auction. And now, if you polished it up, got it ready to sell, I'd probably, probably get over 100,000 in equity. So, whoa, that's a really great number, Alton. Yay.
But is that, you said it's over a year time span?
No, I bought this house 6 years ago. Right. Oh. But let's talk about as an investor. So I put $10,000 down on this house. Wow. And so if you think, okay, in 6 years, you 10x your money. I mean, I know it's not just like that. There's taxes, there's cost, right? But I have to live anyway, right? So for me, now I have to move. Now I have equity, right? Whereas if I had bought this house new, probably would have had maybe 40,000 less in equity here, right? But the downside again, I can rough it, And so when we bought this house, it didn't have any hangers in the closet. It didn't have any doors, wow. Right? They didn't even have the water turned on. So like technically, I was rolling the dice to say, hey, they may have poured cement down the sink. Who knows, right? I had to stretch the car. I had to do a lot of things, and even still, it's not done. It's because of me, right? I could have invested all that in the beginning, right? But I'd rather just amortize it personally. But, that's to each their own. So as far as a fixer-upper value, well, what can you handle? What is your, honestly, it's really about like your wife. Man, can your wife live with sheets instead of doors? Right? Like, maybe not.
I mean, you got 4 kids. Yeah. We got a problem.
Exactly. So,
you need doors.
So that's kind of the thing. And is when you're getting those repairs done, right? And your budget for that. And how much money do you have to come up with? But again, like for this one, I think we put 5% down or something like that. And it was foreclosed. And so you can do that if you're going to own or occupy the foreclosure, right? Because you're bidding against all the other investors that have to put 20 down, but you say, no, I'm going to live in it, right? It's my homestead. Then all of a sudden you get the advantage, right? So even if the other investors had bid higher than me, they have to take my bid because I said it's a homestead for me. So again, it's good to buy a foreclosure. You're rolling the dice, but then at the end, if you can not get divorced and, have the budget to fix the things that you don't even know, right? I mean, you start adding up these blinds at $40 a pop times 50 windows, right? I mean, it just starts adding up. So you just have to account for that stuff. And
yeah, you get the divorce before you finish, then you lost all your investment and all your equity, right?
So, so you got to be on the same page. But again, for me, it was worth it. And it's actually funny because, I had tons of kids, so I had to buy a bigger house. And so for me, this was a good fit. And if I had fixed it all up anyway, the kids would have trashed it by now.
So when you think about, or when I think about buying a fixer-upper, it comes down to a lot more looking and researching the areas and everything. So when I started looking at the idea of doing it, I was using Zillow, and I was looking for all these foreclosures, right? And then it turned into, now I got to find out what's the value of the houses next door.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah, getting the comps. Yeah.
So is that kind of the strategy you have when you look at a fixer-upper or foreclosure? What is your go-to method to finding that perfect property?
Yeah, and honestly, like, just to be clear, I don't have a business doing that, and I have tried some, but with all these TLC TV shows, everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to get rich and flip this house, and yeah, it'll be great, right? Because they show whatever 6 months worth of work in a 30-minute TV show, and people got some money in their 401k and they just start doing it, right? And so I think to find a good one is just it's really tough in this market, right? Because everybody's had money. We've had this huge bull market since '08, right? '08, everything crashed and then everything's just going, and then everybody's got money and there's a lot of competition. Well, wait 12 months and we'll see, right? Now you'll just be competing against the investors, which is a lot easier to do because investors don't do stupid things and spend too much for properties. But people who think that they're a house flipper because they watch some TLC show, they'll pay stupid amounts for a home. So that's like first and foremost is, like, I'm not a professional that goes out and flips houses every day. But if you're going to do that, you got to get the houses before they get on the market. And that's why all these bandit signs are up. We buy ugly houses. We pay cash for houses and all of this stuff, right? Because they don't want to have to deal with that, because they'll come in, you can go in, and if you can find that, right? If you know your buddy got furloughed and he's got a house and he's going to foreclose on it, and you tell him, hey man, I'll write you a $10,000 check right now if you sign over your house. He's like, shoot, I got furloughed. I'll take the $10,000 check. But he knows that he's got $30,000 in equity if he polishes up the house and sells it. I saved you, right? Because you just got a big check.
but isn't there a time frame as far as tax wise? Like if that same scenario happens, if they sell it within a year, don't they get hit with a higher tax rate?
Who sells
the guy that buys?
There's different tax strategies. Once you start investing that way, there's so many taxes that benefit you, right? So like my first home, I started renting after I lived in it. So there's a law, if you own a home renting business, right, which is what I did, is that as long as you live in it for 2 out of the last 5 years, you don't have to pay any taxes on any money you make, right? So let's say you're living in your house that you bought, and then you're like, I'm going to start renting this sucker. I'm not going to sell it. I got enough cash to put a down payment on a second home. So I'll have a new homestead and I'll just rent this one out. Okay, great. Well, you can't rent it out for more than 2 years. No, you can rent it out to up to 3 years. You just have to live in it for 2 of the last 5. And then now I'm writing off all the expenses. Hey, refrigerator went out, I'll buy you a new one. And of course it's not free, but it goes against the profit of the rent check that I'm getting as the investor, right?
So then if you live in it the first 2 years, rent it for the next 3, do you have to move back in?
No, you just sell it and don't pay capital gains taxes on it, right? So you just make that profit. And what that allows you to do is milk out that appreciation, right? So when I sold my first house, I got, it was like a $50,000 or $60,000 check because it continued to appreciate while I was renting. Meanwhile, I'm telling the tax man that I have this business asset that these other people are living in, and they're depreciating my asset because they're living in it. So I'm telling the tax man every year it's going down in value for $30,000. Meanwhile, they're paying me, let's say they're paying $1,000 a month. So it's actually, I'm losing money on this rental, but really we all know that the house is actually appreciating and I'm making income. And at that time I was a W-2 employee. So like my second housing business actually made me pay less taxes on my W-2 because it was showing a loss. So I even made more money in taxes that way. And then when I sold it and got that big check, I didn't pay a dime on it because it was my homestead, right? It was my house. So if you're listening, what you've heard so far is go find a mortgage broker and rent your house, because that's how W-2 employees will pay taxes until you have a rental business. And then now it's like, I mean, there was one time I remember a tree fell down in my yard. And I was like, I should hire somebody to do that. And I was like, no, I'm going to go buy this nice steel chainsaw. It was like a $500 chainsaw.
Wow.
But it was like a write-off. And it just, I mean, I'm not saying that was wise, but I wanted the chainsaw. And so it actually, I remember when I did the numbers that when you added the taxes and everything, it was actually...
You sound like Tim the Toolman Taylor. I wanted more power.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I ran race gas and, the steel, they had I digress. Yeah, but tax advantage, huge tax advantages for that. But then if you want to sell, there are 1031 exchanges. So let's say that I let them live in the house for 5 years. I could sell and avoid those profits if I did a 1031 exchange, as long as I took that money, the profit, and rolled it back into another investment.
So when you're talking about investor versus consumer, you've mentioned it a few times already, is you can be an investor on one house. I've always been under this mindset of, if you're an investor, you've got two houses, right? You've got the one you live in and then you rent. But
you're a better investor if you have two houses. But hey, if all you have is one, you can definitely utilize that to make you money.
But you obviously can't be an investor if you're renting, period. No way around it.
Oh man, I don't know how you can leverage that into an investment.
But also, in the last time I looked it up, the broker told me if I ever wanted an investment property, it's 20% down. Mm-hmm. Most people can't afford that. So investments automatically just disappear. That's not an option, right?
Well, if you're wanting to be an investor, then you should be saving, because that's really what you are, right? Is that you're someone with money. So you need to be figuring out ways to get that money. Having said that, though...
but what about the average Joe?
Well, the average Joe should be saving his money.
You know that millennials don't save money. Then that's why we're relying on Social Security to bail us out.
The millennials aren't investors. Hey, you might have to rough it for a little while. You might not be able to go and get your nails done every other week, right? Like, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. I mean, I lived in a travel trailer. So, look, you're not getting any sympathy from me. Hey, you're living in your mom's basement? Save some money. Sell your Xbox.
That's asking a little too much. But
then don't be an investor. You can rent. Let me buy the house and I'll rent it to you. But to your question about the 20%, yeah, save up 20%. You're a smarter investor. You're better. You're more committed. But you can get hard money loans, and if you find the right hard money lender, they'll loan you money based on the fixed up value of the home, right? So let's say that you can capture a property for $100,000. You put $20,000 of fixer-upper into it, right? And then when you're done, the house is worth $150,000, right? So the after repaired value is going to be $150,000. Some of these they'll lend you, and it varies, depends on markets. It depends on the actual investor that's willing to give you the money and how much confidence he has in you and all that, whether it's your first time or not. But but they will loan you based on the after repaired value. So like if you, they say they'll loan you 90% of the after repaired value of $150,000 home. That means that they will loan you, what is it? 135,000, right? If my math is right, all you data checkers can check that. So they'll hard money you the 135,000. So now you can go buy cash for that house, and you got money to fix it up, right? Because I said it was a $100,000 house. You still got $35K left over, right? And now you spend the $20K, but you blew your budget, so it's actually $25K, but you still have that money. And now those types of loans, they're usually like 6 months, maybe 12, and they're a higher interest rate. But look, if you're looking to take on a project, there are ways, right? There are ways. I mean, that's no money out of pocket, right? You just get the loan. And a lot of those, they'll look at, the money that you're making and all that to make sure that you're going to be able to pay and all of that stuff. But a lot of the hard money stuff, you want to have good credit for it, but you don't have to have a bunch of cash. And again, I'm not like an expert on this, but you can look into these hard money loans and all of these things, and they all vary depending on what they are in the project and your experience and all that. But work the deal.
Well, I will say this. So food for thought, if you are going to rent, my grandparents have a property that we've been renting for them, and it's been bringing them income. The one thing I would suggest is looking up companies like Renter Warehouse. They manage the contracts. They deal with the customer, right? Mm-hmm. And you can get away from having to deal with all the headache that you normally would. And they specialize in it. Unfortunately, I think it comes out to $100 a month that you pay. Sure. Plus, then every time you rewrite a contract, I believe they make you do like first month rent or half first month, something like that. Yeah. But, what do you think? Is it worth the value to get somebody to manage that, or would you manage it yourself?
Is it, is your time worth more or not? Right. I think a lot of people, they want to do it, because they're like, oh man, that's $1,200 a year. That's probably most of my profits. And it's true. Right. But what happens when the guy doesn't pay? Are you going to go knock on his door? Nobody's going to do that. Right. I mean, maybe you will. Yeah. Is that the situation you want to be in? I had a guy that I gave some, trying to work one of these off the books deals. I gave him some earnest money, and then ended up his wife was suing him. And so when we were looking at the title, it came out, and dude bailed with my earnest money. And I'm from Texas. I got guns. I thought, I'll just go get my money back. I mean, it was a thought in my head. I'm like, dude, he stole money from me. He stole it. Right? Yeah. I didn't do that. Because I just realized like it's just not worth it. So I think you got to look at yourself and say, what are you willing to do? And then is that even a good idea? Because I'm willing to do some things that are bad ideas, right? That I have to catch myself on. And your quality of life. I think the 10% or $100 a month to have a property management company is super nice. And we didn't even talk about Airbnb, but that's another great way to even make more money. Like this house right now, I think I can rent for $2,000, $2,200 a month. There's a guy, now it's totally against the rules, so of course I couldn't encourage that, but there's a guy in my neighborhood, like it's against all the HOA rules to Airbnb your house.
Well, yeah, and city of Austin and surrounding areas, they all have laws.
Oh yeah, it's totally against the law, but this guy's making bank because I'm like, this house is in my neighborhood, and he's got so many reviews over the last like 3 years. I think he's got reviews going back that far, and they're all stellar reviews. And I know he's making, because I'm looking at his Airbnb, so I know how much he's charging for it. I know he's making way more than you could charge for a home for like a monthly rent, right? Long term, right? We're talking short term. So, I mean, that's a whole nother deal, is to buy a house and then Airbnb that sucker.
Well, let's get to it. Let's do the deciding factor.
Now it's time for our deciding factor.
So what would you say is, I'll let you kick it off. I don't want to steal the thunder and glory from you.
Well, Glory. Here we go. For me, it's like I said, I approach homes from the mindset that it's an investment. And like, even if you look at someone like Grant Cardone, which is just going to spoil our whole entire show, but I think the last time I heard him, it was something insane. He's $750 million in real estate that his company owns, and he rents his house.
What?
So, but what he says is like, look, I want to live where I want to live. I'm not really concerned about buying a place and getting locked into it. And he's got so much cash, it doesn't matter. So, anyway, that's what I've heard him say. But for me, I do not have $750 million tied up in investments. I don't have, I don't know what that equates to cash flow, but, that's not me. So for me, it's about equity capture. And so for me, I'm going to buy a home, and I'm going to buy a house that maybe it's a fixer-upper, maybe it's not. Maybe it's foreclosed, maybe it's not. Is there equity capture there? If there's equity capture, I'm in. If I can talk to a mortgage broker and they can cut me a serious deal on the interest rate, on the closing cost, capture that equity. If look at the market. Is the market good? Is the market bad? Figure that out, figure out where it's going to go, and buy with the intent to invest. Because here's the deal. You're missing out on so much money if you're not playing that game.
But what about the first topic that we did for now or later or what?
Well, I would say, referencing that I said that I think we're switching from a buyer's market to more of a seller's market. I think that, it's always the question of, well, I could make more later, right? If you waited and you bought a foreclosure, if there's more foreclosures, you get a deeper discount, right?
So it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market.
Well, it's yet to be seen. I think a lot of people right now are not getting paid.
Right.
So what that tells me, you referenced, it takes them longer to kick you out. Okay, so what does that mean? If someone doesn't pay their mortgage for the next 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, next, we're recording, what is today, April 5th or April 7th or April? 7th. It's early April, okay? And so 12 months from now, what's that foreclosure market going to look like? I'm going to say, if things in the economy don't turn around quick, there's going to be more foreclosures in, 12 months from now than there are now. But should you wait? Well, if you wait and there's a bunch of foreclosures, how much do you think your current property is going to be worth? So if you're in a property now, it's going to be down. So if it were me and you could get a loan right now with the interest rates, get a bunch of cash, sit on it. And then when you find the right property and the right deal, then you've got cash to use.
Gotcha. So my deciding factor is actually based around my own situation, right? So renting, what should I do? I view this as a great buyer's market coming up. So I really need to find some way to buy. I'm the type where it's kind of conservative, right? I always grew up, you got to buy a house, build your equity, stop wasting your money on rent. I do feel that way. I feel like I am throwing hundreds and hundreds of dollars out the window that I could have in my own pocket. Not to mention, I can make it my own. If I were single, right, I could even rent out a room to somebody. There's all these apps for it now that you can do to get a roommate. So for me, I think there's too much to buying. Now, obviously, depending on how much you have to put down, that really might hold you from actually buying. But I think the goal is you really should buy right now. Of course, you mentioned that guy you just mentioned where he's got a lot of property, but
Cardone, yeah.
Right. So
look him up if you've never heard of him.
So I do believe there's a lot of people out there that want that mobility, which we talked about in my pros and cons list earlier that I found. And it's up for everybody's different situation, but primarily I think the deciding factor should be try to buy a house. If it turns into an investment later on, I think that's good. Make sure you really look at the market, because Austin, man, you could buy a house in Austin, turn around and sell it that same year and make a profit, period. Unless you're in a really crappy house. But then if you go down to, say, San Antonio, I don't think you have that same market. I think you really should look for fixer-upper, which there are more fixer-uppers in San Antonio than I've seen in Austin the last time I checked.
Yeah.
So it's you've got to be smart in your own area too. Out in the rural area, I have no clue. That's
yeah. I mean, it's I think what I think we're both saying is, like, look at your own situation, look at what your needs are and desires. I mean, I've rented before too, and man, it's nice when the ceiling starts leaking and you just pick up the phone. Hey, get over here, right? So there's definitely pros and cons to each. It's just where you're at and what you're comfortable with and what your goals are. What are you willing to, suffer through, or what are the downsides that you can handle? Yep. And, do the positives outweigh the negatives for you? But yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely the investment aspect. I can't ignore.
True. All right. Well, I guess that does it for our show today. We appreciate you listening in and hope to see you soon. Yeah. Say bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of The Deciding Factor, giving you food for thought on real life issues. Be sure to click, like, and subscribe to this podcast, as well as all your big social media outlets, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to check out our website at thedecidingfactorpodcast.com and give us comments and feedback. Until next time, stay safe and remember to keep an open mind.